And we're back in the car like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your late Monday afternoon into early evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. I apologize in advance. This could be another emotional episode because today is Michael J. Fox's 64th birthday. There are certain people in life who we never meet, but who somehow attain a great importance in our life. They become special to us. Now, when it comes to celebrities, it could be a singer that we've been to their concert and we feel a connection with their music. It could be a writer where we feel like their work speaks to us. It could be a performer, an actor or actress whose work we really connect with. And sometimes it's just that we really love a number of movies of a particular person. It could be a sports figure that if something terrible happens, it hurts us and we react almost as if it's a family member. Well, Michael J. Fox, for not just Gen Xers, but a lot of Gen Xers and some young boomers, Michael J. Fox he's a bit of a tragic figure. His life is marked by stupendous achievement, tireless work in the charity realm. But he's somebody who was dealt a really bad genetic hand and has somehow not only made the most of it, but he's somehow become an inspirational figure when he just started off as a superbly talented kid, hitting his marks like a pro from the beginnings of his turn on a sitcom, which, I mean, easily top 10 great sitcoms ever made. You could even put it higher if you prefer. But Michael J. Fox nobody knows how much time he has left. He has Parkinson's that has advanced to the point where, and nobody really knows this for sure, I don't think that he can walk unassisted. His muscles don't fire properly. The neurons, it's all bad. Parkinson's, in some ways, when you get to that level, and unfortunately somebody who Michael J. Fox became close with, Muhammad Ali, was somebody, now Ali had the gene for it, but they feel that the repeated blows to the head from being a professional boxer, it hastened the process. It made it more likely. In the case of Michael J. Fox, he started showing symptoms. He wasn't even 30. But this doesn't have to be me just talking about the negative and how sad it is to know that he has been struggling with symptoms literally 34 years. He first felt symptoms, actually a little over 34 years, while shooting the movie Doc Hollywood, a film which was pretty successful financially, did Woody Harrelson. But his life is fascinating, and it is something that we can draw inspiration from. Cliche though it may be, continuing to fight and continuing to show up every day for yourself, for your family, for your fans, because you don't know any other way to be. So Michael J. Fox was Canadian. He was born in I don't know what part of Canada. And you start saying famous TV and or film comedians from Canada, you think Ryan Reynolds, but going back even before Michael hit the scene, you had John Candy, who had made inroads a little bit in the movie business by 1982. But John Candy's, SCTV and some of the other work that he did before he got to the States, and then making big supporting appearances in films like Stripes, National Lampoon's Vacation, before having a really great, but unfortunately not long movie career. As many masterpiece films as John Candy was part of, as many great all-time comedies and some decent, some solid dramas, the great role that he has in Oliver Stone's JFK. But Michael J. Fox he did a movie that is now a massive cult film, which for a time, I think it was almost impossible to see, one of those that was sort of buried by the studio, a film called Midnight Movies, which, embarrassed to say this, I have not seen it. But his big break was Family Ties. Family Ties was the sort of sitcom that TV Land, and I don't mean the channel, but I just mean the process of making TV shows. It was right in the wheelhouse of 80s sitcom. The concept was you have a husband and wife and you have 3 children. They're probably supposed to be 40, maybe they're mid to late 30s. It doesn't matter the exact ages, but they were 60s radicals, right? Everybody talks about coding and all of this kind of stuff now. Well, they didn't say words like coding back then, but they were 60s radicals. And we get the idea that they did some illegal shit during that crazy era. You know, the 1968 DNC, fire, all kinds of shit going on. People could have gotten hurt. The movie Medium Cool, Haskell Wexler gets into it, Robert Forster. But they were that kind of couple where they were firebrands. They're attending rallies. They're your Spirit of 76, kind of just nuts. But now they have calmed down. And they have 3 kids and they're living in suburbia somewhere quietly in Cleveland. But we get the idea there might be some alphabet soup, FBI, CIA, NSA might knock at their door for some criminal bullshit they might have pulled somewhere in the 60s. But they have 3 kids. The eldest, Alex P. Keaton. And I didn't understand the kind of contrast. It doesn't land when you're a kid. You're watching a sitcom, you're laughing, you're having fun. But they're these sort of radicals. And again, if you want to get political, but we can just say philosophical. The parents are very progressive in their thinking, even if they're quieter about it. I mean, the father, he runs a public television station. I mean, nail meat head. They're not trying to trick us with the setup to this series. Alex P. Keaton, I think he's a high school, or he's supposed to be, maybe he's a junior in high school. So Michael J. Fox was playing younger. He was, I believe, 19 when the first episodes were shot. 19, he actually could have been 20, but he's in that range. I think his character is supposed to be younger. So he's still in high school, but he's already a Reagan Republican. And for the time, that got laughs just for that, because you figure the typical sitcom audience, especially of that era, they're going to be more sympathetic to the parents than the kid. But the show in the first season, it focuses on the parents. The concept of the show is not young, humorous Reagan Republican 17-year-old deals with his woke parents. Like, that's not it. The show is about the parents in the first season and their kind of trials and tribulations. Alex P. Keaton is an important supporting character, but the events are filtered through Stephen and Elise Keaton's lives. And Stephen Keaton, played by a really solid actor, Michael Gross, who famously was in the first Tremors movie, the late Fred Ward, who I loved, and Kevin Bacon, a lot of other, terrific genre performers. And he did a number of TV movies. He was really good. I feel like he probably should have had an even better career. Not that, who am I to talk about that? But he was really good. He had an authenticity. And Meredith Baxter as Elise Keaton, really strong. But even in the first season, one thing that worked with this show, you want to see more of Michael J. Fox if you're picking it up now in the first season, like, well, I thought he was the star. We'll get to that. But the show takes the relationship between the kid, the middle sister, played by Justine Bateman, who's really good too. She's kind of a bubblehead. The character of Mallory's like a clown. And then you had Tina Yothers as the youngest sibling, Jennifer. And that character got more interesting as the show went on. But the relationship between the parents and Alex, despite the differing views, the show does not devolve into cheap humor. They don't go for easy laughs. Michael J. Fox's Alex P. Keaton is so sincere. His parents take him seriously. They may not agree with his, wearing I Love Ronald Reagan or whatever he does, but they don't ridicule him. And he doesn't ridicule them. Now, maybe this is old school, but there is a respect. He loves his parents and they adore him. They love that he's so socially and civically engaged. They can't believe how smart he is and how much of a go-getter, how aggressive he is with his future careers and whatever it is that he wants to do. This show is a really upbeat, uplifting, positive show, even if the 2 parents and the kid, if they were just 3 random people talking politics, it would devolve into a screaming match. But there is a respect and a love between the 3 of them. And the way Alex, in a more humorous way, deals with his 2 siblings. So Michael J. Fox, kid comes out of nowhere. Nobody had seen midnight movies, or he was on Trapper John. I think he did 2 episodes on that show. That was a successful TV show, just before Family Ties. I was on for many years. But the show didn't do that great in the ratings in the first season. It didn't do that great. But NBC and the head producer, I don't know if it was Warren Littlefield at that time, but whoever was running that arm of NBC, that the sitcom and the TV dramas, whatever it would be, I think it was Littlefield, but it doesn't really matter. They knew they had something. That Michael J. Fox, this is not just the normal kid reading his lines. He is magic. He's magic. The show we could kind of take or leave. The ratings were just okay. It was on the border of, are we going to bring it back? But I assume because Gary David Goldberg was already so well respected within the industry, they didn't want to lose him. And they said, what if we kind of repackage this show, but we make Michael's character the main character, and the parents' crazy background, we're gonna de-emphasize that to the point where it doesn't even come up anymore. I don't even know if it comes up again. It still works for public television, but you wouldn't know that, okay, they were completely, wacky out there, screaming and yelling about all kinds of different things in the 60s. They would have been Aidan Quinn at my sister's college graduation yelling about anti-globalization while he was getting booed. That was that was a great moment. That's 20 years ago. I didn't even know what he was talking about, but I was laughing. My dad was laughing. My mom was embarrassed. My aunt was embarrassed. But they de-emphasized the parents' past, and they de-emphasized the parents' thoughts on Reagan. Like, there's nothing of that after the first season. Nothing. It went in a totally different direction, just focusing on Alex P. Keaton and Michael J. Fox. I think he won an Emmy for supporting actor in the first season, and then the next 3 seasons, he won best actor. He might have won a couple of Globes, but I know for sure he won at least 2, and I think he won 3 Emmys as best actor. Again, the show started to become filtered through Alex's perception. So he's working on sitcom. And then in 84, he gets cast in a movie that's not very good. And it's been redone, a lot of different permutations. There's a TV show now, Teen Wolf. It's really fucking stupid movie, but he's good. And the story also has a kind of a good message, cliche again, about believing in yourself. And he hits all of his marks, and some of the supporting performers are absolute riot. It's just okay. But right around the time of him shooting Teen Wolf, Steven Spielberg, in the executive producer mindset, was getting a movie ready with his frequent collaborator and kind of his protege. They work together, Bob Zemeckis, or Robert Zemeckis, as he's professionally known. It's the kind of thing with De Niro. Professionally, he's known as Robert De Niro, but everybody just calls him Bobby. Nobody calls him Robert in person. And that's why I call him Bobby D or Mr. De Niro. Nobody ever calls him Robert. Well, nobody calls Robert Zemeckis Robert in person. They call him Bob Zemeckis. So they were getting Back to the Future, or what became Back to the Future, ready. And Steven Spielberg was friends with Gary David Goldberg. And Spielberg, even though it's hard to believe, Spielberg was still in his 30s. He already was the biggest star director in Hollywood by the mid-1980s. Jaws was 10 years in the past, and Spielberg had knocked out one monster hit after another. Whether it's Close Encounters, whether it's E.T., whether it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, whether it's Temple of Doom, he's already on Mount Rushmore, practically. He's still in his 30s, but he was never going to direct. To my knowledge, he was never going to be the director of Back to the Future. He was going to be what you would call the executive producer, the coordinating producer, and it was his old company, Amblin Entertainment. He had a shingle at Universal going back decades, and he had a good relationship with the somewhat notorious Sid Sheinberg, who ran the movie arm of MCA Universal. Steven Spielberg wanted Michael J. Fox to play the lead character of Marty McFly. Now, in a world, 40 years later, in a world where everything seems to be IP, where every potential sci-fi, comedy, blockbuster is comic book, IP, Back to the Future was an original idea. This was not based on any pre-existing material previously published or produced. The script was written, and they're ready to cast. And Spielberg said, the kid on TV, he's the guy. That's the guy. That's Marty McFly. So Spielberg went to a friend, and also with the understanding that nobody wanted to say no to Steven Spielberg 40 years ago. This would now be more than 40 years ago. But Gary David Goldberg said, I can't let you take the kid here because he's going to quit the show. He's going to quit the show. He's not just going to do your movie. He's going to quit the show. Spielberg says, well, can't we? No, Steven, you know I love you. I'm sorry. My answer is no. I can't let him out of his contract. I can't do it. Also, he'll be working probably 20 hours a day. Can't do it. So Spielberg didn't fight. You know, even young Spielberg, he's not looking to make enemies or break friendships, but he had it in his head. This is, we're supposed to get this guy and we're supposed to make this movie and it's going to be great. They end up casting also a wonderful actor, but nothing like Michael J. Fox in Eric Stoltz. And it's crazy to think there's a version of The Matrix where Eric Stoltz is Marty McFly. You know who the original Doc Brown was going to be? You know they wanted to play Doc Brown? Mark Mothersbaugh. Now, if you're under 40, you might not know who that is. Mark Mothersbaugh is a musician. He headlined the band Devo. He was the front man. They did some really interesting music. But Mark Mothersbaugh as Doc Brown? No, thank you. I'm all set here. You know, so we had Eric Stoltz in the movie, but they got Christopher Lloyd. He was like the 8th choice, and everybody else who they had targeted for Doc Brown either did one of these or they were too busy or I don't get the concept. I don't want to work with Eric Stoltz, whatever. I don't know what it was. Now we would know all of that stuff for 100% certain. Back then there was no social media for people to go like this and report every little detail about an upcoming film. So they shoot 6 weeks. 6 weeks. They probably shot a third of the film. Nobody knows the exact amount. Nobody has seen all of the footage with Eric Stoltz. And unfortunately, he's a wonderful actor. Love his performance in Mask, even under the prosthetics comes across. He's terrific in the John Hughes, the one that he did with Leah Thompson. Can't even remember the one where you expect that she's going to be a nasty, and she ends up being really nice. And they fall in love. The character. Was that the one with John Cryer? You know the movie that I'm talking about, certainly if you're a Gen Xer. So Eric Stoltz, talented actor. He did Killing Zoe with Tarantino's writing partner Roger Avary in the 90s. He has a really good role in Rob Roy, also in the right around the same time. So Eric Stoltz, a terrific film actor. But he was wrong for Marty McFly. And after 6 weeks, it's not that the footage is bad, because you look at some of the scenes that were shot twice, like when Marty goes back in time, spoiler alert, and meets Crispin Glover's George McFly. There's nothing wrong with what he's doing there. But what everybody connected to the production said is that Eric Stoltz played the film as if he was a character in an existential crisis, not a guy who actually has been sent back in time. And it was the perception difference that was the problem. There were big laughs that we got that weren't registering. And the thing is, if you're a filmmaker who knows comedy, and Ivan Reitman, the late Ivan Reitman, has talked about this, there are moments that you know are supposed to work. You know are supposed to be laugh lines for the audience. You frame it a certain way, and the actors pause a certain way. And it wasn't funny. There were moments that were supposed to be uproarious that Stoltz, it's Shakespeare. It's not working. So Spielberg, hat in hand, goes to Gary David Goldberg again, begging and pleading as much as it's possible for someone already as successful to come across as a desperate guy who needs a crust of bread or he's going to starve to death. But that's how Spielberg presented himself. We need him. Gary, whatever we have to do. I love Eric, but it's not working, and we're going to leave a great movie on the table. It's going to probably just be okay, and we know it can be better. We need your guy, please. So Goldberg finally acquiesced. Now, bear in mind, Michael J. Fox had not read a script. He hadn't read a script. I think he talked about this on Stern, with Howard Stern, about a dozen years ago. He had heard about it, but I don't think he'd gotten a script because he couldn't do the movie. They weren't going to let him do it. He got the script. He said yes. And unfortunately for what became his Parkinson's, the fact that he was working 20 to 22 hour days the entire time of shooting Back to the Future, it most likely sped the process of his illness. Maybe it was going to hit him in his mid-30s. It hit him in his late 20s. But they got rid of almost all of that. I mean, any footage from the first shoot that has Eric Stoltz in it, it ain't in the movie. But there are plenty of shots from the first shoot. There are shots of Doc Brown. You wouldn't know this, and I didn't know this until I read it. There are shots of Doc Brown from the first sequence at the time Twin Pines Mall that were from the Eric Stoltz version. Because there wasn't any reason. He's wearing the same, the hair, everything is the same. They didn't have to shoot it just because now Michael is here. standalone shots of Doc Brown. If they could save 2 days of shooting, be crazy not to use them. So there are some shots from the Eric Stoltz shoot that remain in the film. Again, that's not really critically important, but they shot the movie, they edited, they made the movie, and they just knew. Spielberg and Zemeckis and the cast, and Leah Thompson and Thomas F. Wilson, who plays Biff, and Leah plays Lorraine, the mom of Marty McFly. They had some issues with Eric Stoltz. Stoltz was a method actor who would really get deep into character, and he was so deep in character that he was difficult to communicate with when they weren't shooting. And Leah Thompson, even though she ended up working with him the next year in the John Hughes film, which name I can't remember, she said she was having trouble getting along with him. So what the fuck are we doing here? So Michael J. Fox came in, everything was great, and they all realized we just made movie magic here. We made magic. This is fantastic. Now, the one thing, I mentioned the head of MCA Universal, Sid Sheinberg. This is so dumb, you're going to think I'm making it up, but if you Google it, you will see this is exactly what happened. So the film was wrapped. And Spielberg presented a cut, probably by hand, to somebody that he already had known for many years, Sid Sheinberg. Now, Sid Sheinberg's wife was Lorraine Gary, the actress who played Mrs. Brody, Roy Scheider's wife in Jaws. A little bit of a nepo situation that she got cast. It doesn't really matter. I thought she was pretty well cast in that particular film. She has a couple of funny moments, and they didn't do the plot angle from Jaws where the Richard Dreyfuss character has the affair with Brody's wife. That would have made the movie a little stickier. I mean, it'd be very funny to see Richard Dreyfuss giggling away as he has sex with his friend's wife in the movie, but it wouldn't have worked. Not for the story that Spielberg was trying to tell. But Sid Sheinberg watched the movie. Now, they were pretty confident he was going to like it. When I say they, Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, the other coordinating producer, I should have mentioned his name already, and Spielberg. Sid Sheinberg watches the movie, loved the movie. You were right. Michael's amazing, all this kind of stuff. So he's on board. He says, all right, I just got one thing. I want the title of the movie. I don't like Back to the Future. I want the title of the movie to be Spaceman from Pluto. What? Well, that's not a good title. Now, if you remember the scene in the movie where Michael, he goes back in time and the kid has when he crashes into the barn, Twin Pines Mall, Lone Pine Mall, that whole thing. He crashes into the barn. And there's a kid there who has a comic book and he thinks that this is an alien. This is a spaceman. He has the magazine. It's called Spaceman from Pluto. Sid Sheinberg was convinced that needed to be the title of the movie. Long story short, Steven Spielberg, rather than engage Sid Sheinberg directly and say, Sid, you're a moron. No offense, but you're stupid. No. He wrote a memo to Sid Sheinberg saying, we're glad that you enjoyed the movie, and your laugh about wanting to, your joke about wanting to call this film Spaceman from Pluto, the entire cast and crew laughed for 5 minutes. Thanks for your gift of laughter. Whatever he says something where in Spielberg's mind, that's not really, you're just fucking with us. You can't possibly be stupid enough to think this is a title. Spielberg managed to get all of that across in this memo. And Sheinberg was so embarrassed when he realized that Spielberg hadn't even taken him, like he wasn't even arguing about the title. Spielberg knows that I'm not serious. That's how bad this title is. He never brought it up again. They were allowed to title it Back to the Future. And thank goodness for history that it wasn't Spaceman from Pluto. Are we serious? I mean, why not call it Howard the Duck? Oh, they did that the next year. George Lucas, Howard the Duck. But at least there was a comic book called Howard the Duck. So Back to the Future, as we know, was a massive, monster, runaway box office hit. One of the most beloved movies of all time. And they made 2 more. The second one I didn't like when I first saw it. It came out 4 years later, 1989. But the second and third were shot, in the immortal words of Yankee broadcaster John Sterling, they were shot back to back and belly to belly. So similar to what, for example, Lord of the Rings did many years later, where you get all of your locations together and you shoot, in that case, 3 films concurrently. They shot Back to the Future 2 and 3 together. Now, Back to the Future 3, I saw in theaters when it opened. Really liked it. I liked it a lot better than the second one, but the irony is, the second one plays a lot better now. I was disappointed the first time watching it, I think because I saw it on the plane. And the plane is what? According to the late, great Pulitzer Prize winning critic Roger Ebert, it is the single worst venue to watch a movie. And I feel like that ruined it for me. But watching Back to the Future a few more times since, I think it's fantastic. It's a different interpretation of the events of the first movie, basically. And if I'm asked what is the best trilogy ever, it's Back to the Future. Now, the answer used to be Star Wars, before George Lucas destroyed everyone's childhood with the prequel trilogy, and J.J. Abrams destroyed everyone's childhood with the sequel trilogy. And Indiana Jones was the greatest trilogy until they made Crystal Skull, which is not so good, but I thought Dial of Destiny to some extent redeemed it. But the idea is Michael J. Fox was a key player in the greatest trilogy ever. Bar none. There's nothing better. All three movies play brilliantly. They play beautifully, and he is so good as Marty McFly. We talk about great bits of casting. Clint Eastwood as Harry Callahan, right? Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. Christopher Reeve, may he rest in eternal peace, as Kal-El, Clark Kent, Superman. Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly is as perfect as any of those. It almost didn't happen. So outside of Back to the Future, he made some interesting films, interesting movies, which weren't altogether successful. He did a movie with his bride and they've been together almost 40 years, Tracy Pollan, with Kiefer Sutherland, called Bright Lights, Big City. Great cast. Jason Robards Jr., Swoozie Kurtz, just an awesome cast. It's not that great. It should have been better. It had the pieces to be better. It's just okay. He did Light of Day in '87 with Joan Jett, famous rocker, obviously. That movie's all right. It's not great. Secret of My Success was a hit. I mean, that's a Gen X standard. The late Richard Jordan as the uncle, the whole thing, that is not as good as, it's not as good as I thought it was when I first saw it. It's pretty, on the nose, nail, meat, head again kind of stuff. Doc Hollywood was a hit. Decent movie. Woody Harrelson kind of, I would say, almost does the heavy lifting in that film. And he made a lot of interesting movies in the 90s. He did The Frighteners with Peter Jackson years before, speaking of Lord of the Rings, years before Peter Jackson did Lord of the Rings. It's okay. He did a movie, Greedy, where he's technically the lead. And the late Kirk Douglas is fantastic as like the octogenarian, where everybody's looking for the inheritance and that, stuff like that. And I would say his best performance in movies outside of Back to the Future, because he had that film For Love or Money with Gabrielle Anwar. It's just okay. He plays the greatest concierge in the history of New York City hotels. It's not a great movie, but he plays a chief of staff. Basically, George Stephanopoulos. He's playing Stephanopoulos 30 years ago, because Stephanopoulos worked in the first Clinton administration. So the movie The American President, Rob Reiner, really good movie. Whatever your political leanings are, it's a good movie, because the Michael Douglas character, I mean, he's a Democrat president, but he could be a Republican president. The stuff in the film, similar to the movie Dave, they're not trying to make enemies in the world of the story. There's a lot of stuff with lobbyists, and it doesn't really matter what the political affiliation of the president is. Not, this isn't one of those movies where you're going to either like it or not like it based on that. But Michael J. Fox as the chief of staff, it's amazing. Like, he could have gotten Best Supporting Actor. He is so good holding his own with Douglas, who was just knocking everything out of the park in that era, and with Martin Sheen, who can be quite an intimidating performer in his own right. And Annette Bening is really great in that film. Basically, it's a love story. The president is a widower, meets this lobbyist. She's trying to twist his arm, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and twist other things. But does she really love him? Does he love her? It sounds stupid, but it's a really solid movie, and it made a lot of 10 best lists in '95. Unfortunately, his health had already slipped. He first showed symptoms of Parkinson's. He talks about this in his autobiography, which is ironically titled Lucky Man. It is a grueling, bruising, harrowing read, and this is only up until about 15, 20 years ago. So you think about how much more so it would be now. But he was 28, I think 28 going on 29 when he started to show symptoms, where he was just having like nerve spasms that didn't make sense. And sometimes those are you maybe strain a muscle and you have a muscle that's moving, or a ligament, a tendon, or something that's firing that shouldn't, and it just goes away. But in his case, it just got progressively worse. And he actually was diagnosed at age 30, kept it quiet. He was feeling okay, except for the occasional weird movements and stuff. And he, sometimes would have difficulty keeping his hand still. So they gave him medicine. Unfortunately, with Parkinson's, it's progressive and degenerative. And in that regard, it has parallels with ALS, what's known informally as Lou Gehrig disease, unfortunately, but amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. But in the case of Fox, he got progressively worse. But people didn't know until sometime when he was doing Spin City, another sitcom, which he is phenomenal. How many awards did he win for that? Like, this is a guy, Golden Globes, Emmys. He won so many awards. People's Choice Awards, those really aren't that big of a deal. But Golden Globes and Emmys, especially Emmys in the United States, taken very seriously. He was a home run hitter. Whatever he did, he was great. Even when his health started to go downhill, doing the voice for Stuart Little in those movies. Whatever he did, he was great. He never was just a guy picking up a paycheck. You could see him straining and fighting and scratching and clawing for every laugh, for every dramatic beat. He was just a great actor. And because of his physical condition, anytime he makes an appearance, let's say at an awards show, he not only gets a standing ovation, but there are times where everyone in the gallery is crying. They might be trying not to cry, but you can't see him not get emotional, especially if you're of a certain age. He'll always be Marty McFly. He'll always be that little pipsqueak, that small guy he stood up for himself in a lot of situations where bigger people would have turned around and run and would have buckled. Like, Marty McFly has got the guts of a burglar, and there's no one else who could have done what he did in that role. And he's great in all three films. Like, he's not so good in part two. He makes you believe this is really who he is. He doesn't seem like an actor just delivering lines. He makes us believe he's really this guy going through these unbelievable madcap, crazy adventures. There's so much more of his career, but I've already run long and I don't want to keep you here forever. Just wanted to give you maybe some bits of information, a little bit of trivia about Michael J. Fox that you hadn't read before or heard. I mean, he met his wife. She co-starred on Family Ties. I think it was the 1985, 86 season. It was 84, 85, 85, 86. They met on set. And that's when their now 4 decades long romance began. It's really remarkable. And what he says in the book, it's a very difficult concept to wrap your head around. He was going down a bad path of drinking and drugs. He wasn't at the level of addict, at least it doesn't sound like, but he was close. And the illness, when things started to accelerate and when the Mayo Clinic it had to be a terrible moment for them, for the doctor that worked with him. The guy's 30. Was he even 30? Michael, I don't know how to tell you this, but you have Parkinson's. This is not going to go away. This is just going to keep getting worse. He soldiered on. He managed to get clean from alcohol and drugs. And he seems to come across that as awful as some parts of his life were when he wrote this book, he's still humble and he's still grateful for his life. Even as Lou Gehrig said, I may have been given a bad break, but today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. And that was kind of what Michael, I think he even mentions Gehrig in the book. He was kind of going for that. Yes, I've gotten a bad break. Yes, this was unfortunate. But I'm still here. I'm still here. And he worked for as long as he can continue to work. He really can't do that anymore. But he makes appearances at charity events, makes appearances at Back to the Future, fan conventions. And there's just no way to look at him now in his older era. I think he got the Presidential Medal of Freedom, but you can't look at him in his older era and not tear up because he's just such a great guy. He comes across like a regular person who just happened to become a huge TV star, a huge movie star in the greatest trilogy in the history of cinema. If I have a vote, and I don't, it's all unofficial anyway. But a happy, hopefully happy 64th birthday to Michael J. Fox, the multiple Emmy, Golden Globe Award winner, and a wonderful film actor, and a stand-up humanitarian. As we like to say, just a real mensch, a really great human being. This has been episode 557 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Monday early evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then,